tools and information for the future college parent.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today's interview is with Vicki Nelson and Dr. Lynn Abrahams. They are the founder and podcast co-host at collegeparentcentral.com. So College Parent Central has a lot of great resources, and they talk a lot about what it's like to be a college parent and give you advice for challenges that college parents might have to deal with. And they also have a couple sections around new college parent and future college parents. And they have a whole bunch of podcasts as well, where you can download and learn about other authors and great other information around being a college parent. As always, our show notes are available at our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. And we appreciate any reviews you can give us wherever you're getting your podcast. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the interview. Today, I'm talking with Vicki Nelson and Dr. Lynn Abrahams. They are the co-host of College Parent Central. Welcome, Vicki, and welcome, Lynn.
Nice to be here.
It's good to be with you.
So tell us a little bit more about how College Parent Central came about, both the website and the podcast, and a little bit of your history, because I find it a little fascinating. So I don't know who wants to go first, but jump right in there.
Well, I will start since I started the podcast, and then I'm going to let Lynn talk about since I started the website, and then I'm going to let Lynn talk about the podcast since she joined me for that. And I started College Parent Central back in 2009, really after Lynn and I were doing a series of workshops for parents at our institution. And we were doing that because our kids were starting to go to college, and we were overwhelmed by the process. So much to keep track of, so much to understand, so many forms, all of that. And we said, we work in higher education and we're overwhelmed by this process. What must it be like for people who don't understand this world? So we started doing some workshops for parents at orientation and some of the events at our school. And then an outgrowth of that was the website to try to provide some of that information for a wider range of parents. It's basically an informational website. And that chugged along for a while. And then a few years ago, I began doing a little arm twisting on Lynn. And
I wasn't sure at first.
All right.
And I am a learning disability specialist. I work with college students and their families. So this is what I've been doing my entire career. And then I got to the point also where when my kids went to college, I was overwhelmed. And so, as Vicki said, that's when we started our workshops. And then we decided to do the podcast. It has been really fun talking to parents about all the issues that come up in terms of parenting college students and the differences between parenting high school students and college students. So this has been quite an adventure, and I'm glad I said yes to Vicki when she
So am I. It's been interesting because we bring we're both in higher education, but slightly different roles. Lynn works with students with learning disabilities, and then I'm a professor of communication, and I also served for several years as director of academic advising. So we have that, and then we have our experiences with our kids, and we tell stories about them, which they're still talking to us, so I guess that's okay. And then the other thing, of course, is we've had the wonderful opportunity of, like you, Brad, of talking to all kinds of people and interviewing, and we learn more all the time too.
Right, absolutely. So I guess one of the things that I've noticed out there is in the media and that type of thing, they try and boil college down to a generic, statements like, well, everybody should get a college education, which is okay. But college is very different for different people. They have different goals. It could be community college all the way up to an elite college. And a typical politician or whatever that's speaking doesn't spend the time to talk about all the variability and all the gray areas and all that kind of stuff. So just interesting that you guys talk about, one of you works with the learning disabilities, and that's one end of the spectrum, all the way up to the crazy competitive schools out there. What do you guys see out there as, I guess, what parents generally don't know or understand as they're sending their students off to school?
I'm going to start in first, Vicki, if that's okay. There are so many choices, as you mentioned, going from taking a year off to deciding maybe college is not the right environment, or doing, the community college first and then transferring, or, shooting for the college of your dreams. So there are so many choices and so many different students with different abilities and skills and strengths. And so I think, one of the messages to parents is talk to your kids. Find out what they want to do. Find out what their strengths are. Find out what their dreams are. Because every single kid is different. I mean, I have 2 sons and they were both totally different. So the first message is talk to your kids and figure out, what are some of the choices?
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that idea of choices is so important because there are so many colleges out there and so many of them that are excellent schools that no one has heard of. And so, doing your homework in terms of understanding the choices as well. And we hear a lot, I think, these days about fit and students finding the college that's the right fit for them. And for some students, that's, a university of 30,000. And for some students, that's a very small liberal arts college, or it may be a community college. And really, one of the things I think parents perhaps don't think about as much, and it goes to what Lynn is saying about talk to your student, is that finding the right college really begins with the student doing some work on figuring out who they are and what it is that makes them tick a little bit, what makes them comfortable, what makes them uncomfortable. Of course, asking an adolescent or a teenager to get to know themselves is really a challenge. But really thinking about what do I want, what do I need, and then really doing the homework of what's out there. That we do tend to paint college with one paintbrush.
Right.
They're all so similar.
Exactly. And I think that's where it implies that it's a commodity in some ways, where it's like, well, any college will do because it's just a piece of paper you're after. And I think there's a lot more to it as far as, again, finding that good fit, not just for the student, but also for the parent and the pocketbook. That's the other piece of the puzzle.
They need to work with you.
Right. And that's all that process. But so, again, your target, your College Parent Central on your website, you've got a whole category that says when there's trouble. So let's talk a little bit about what the types of things are there. And then maybe we can talk about how to maybe not have to ever read this section.
Well, I think it's impossible to anticipate whether or not you're going to have to read this section. I think that's perhaps one of the first and most important messages, and that is that for many, many, many students, there will be trouble. It might be little trouble. It might be big trouble. And by trouble, it can mean academic trouble. It can mean social trouble. It can mean health issues. It can be financial issues. There are all kinds of things that can go wrong. And I think one of the first things is realizing that the path through college isn't one straight shot, straight through college, that it is a very twisty, windy road for a lot of students. And for some, there will be detours. I just had an email from a parent a couple of days ago, actually. My student is flunking out of college. What do I do? And one of the first things when I responded was, it's not a dead end, it's a detour. And so recognizing that there's no shame in the trouble and in the struggle. And for some students, it may mean let's take a break. I went to college because that's what you do after high school, and everyone expected me to, and my heart's not in it. And so really thinking about, what does it mean to be on academic probation? What does it mean to be dismissed? So a lot of the things in a section of the website are about, should you appeal or not appeal? Should you take a break? Should you transfer? The number of students who transfer from one school to another is growing.
Right.
So there are so many different paths, and one is not right and one is not wrong. But there's often a lot of struggle.
Right.
And one of the things we talk about is the role of parents when there's trouble. Because when kids are in high school, we tend to kind of swoop in and try to fix some things. When they're in college, that's a big shift. And now parents' role is to step on the sidelines and be more of a coach and let their kids ask questions and let their kids jump in and try to find out what to do and figure out what to do. Often our kids are way more resilient than we think.
Right.
And so as a parent, it's hard to make that shift though.
And sometimes as a parent, it's not giving the answer and fixing, but just asking the questions. Have you done this? Have you thought about this? Have you talked to this person? What if you took a break? Just prompting the student to think through what they want to do.
Yeah. Another great example, I can't remember where I saw it. I was reading a book or an article somewhere, but the parent question was, wow, that sounds like a real challenge. What do you think you're going to do?
Good response.
Was the parent question of the day, so to speak, in that article. So,
yeah.
And that's I guess a way to look at it. And again, my wife's in higher education too. So the other end of that coin is when the parents decide that they and their lawyer are going to get in there and help figure this out. So if you guys work in higher ed, I'm sure you've at least heard the horror stories of, again, I would almost never recommend that. I don't think that ever ends well, but who knows?
With or without the lawyer, it often doesn't end well. Of the parent who calls and says, I need to I'm having trouble registering my student for classes. He can't get into this. Well, parent, you shouldn't be registering your student for classes. It should be the student.
Right. And that brings us to FERPA. Can you tell us a little bit about what FERPA is? I think is it HERPA? Is it almost exactly the same for healthcare?
Oh, HIPAA.
It's HIPAA for healthcare. What's FERPA?
Well, FERPA is see if I get it right, Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. I think that's right. Or Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And it started to give parents of elementary school students and secondary school students the rights to see their students' records. That if my child is in trouble in 4th grade, I want to see the records. I'm allowed to do that, and that's I think really how FERPA started. And then what happens is when a student goes off to college, that right to their educational records transfers to the student. So, for many parents in elementary school, middle school, high school, they're on their student's portal. There's a parent portal. They can go in every day. They can see what the assignments are. They can see all the grades. Anything happens at school, the first phone call is to the parents. And that's what we're used to. And then your student goes off to college and all of that transfers to them. So now I can't call up the school and say, I want to see my student's grades. The financial piece goes along with that too.
Right.
So and some colleges now I think are sort of waiving that piece, that they really will send the bill to the parents. But
right.
when my kids were in college, the bills went to them, and I used to have to say to them, "You've got to check your email, and if there's a bill, you better send it to me, because otherwise I don't know." So there are waivers that schools can have parents sign, saying, the student signs saying, I waive my rights and allow my parents to see everything, to see my grades and all of that.
Right.
That may or may not be a good idea. I know Lynn likes to talk about that.
Yes.
Well, I think sometimes if we require our students to sign away all of that, it gives the message to students that we don't believe in them and we don't think they'll be okay. I know when my kids went to college, I said to them, I'm not going to require that you sign this, but if you don't tell me the truth, you're going to have to sign it, and that worked out. I know the students that I work with a lot of students with, neurodiverse students and who want their parents to be involved. So they will sign, something because they want that support. There's also, it's important to know that in terms of FERPA, if there's a crisis in any college campus, parents are going to be notified.
Right.
If there's a medical crisis, if there's so yes, it's frustrating for parents that they can't call up and get the grades and, get a lot of information about their son or daughter, but they will find out if there's a crisis.
Right. I mean, it seems to me the general standpoint is, well, and again, the typical college student is an adult. And
sort of.
Right. And well, according to the law, they're an adult. They now are entitled to privacy, and that they, their grades are their grades, and their bills and their whatever is going on at the school is their business, not mom and dad's. And of course, most parents would say, "But I'm paying for it." And it's like,
right.
Yes, you are, but the college is stuck in the middle. So they made some pretty clear lines and said, "Just these are all privacy rights of the student, and if we can't just share that, no matter who's paying the bill, unless the student signs off in some form or another." And I think for some parents, that's a hard pill to swallow, where
it is.
I just wrote a check for tens of thousands of dollars, and now you're not going to tell me what's going on.
We're closing the door.
But yes, that is the way it is.
I think there's something that's interesting, because we've been in this world for a number of years. And back, even in 2009, when we started College Parents Central, there was this image of helicopter parents. We still talk about that, the Black Hawk that swoops in, or submarine parents that are under the surface and with the periscope checking, and lawnmower parents who mow everything out of the way, and all of this. But the image was of these helicopter parents who would swoop in, and the student who was trying to fend them off, who didn't want, leave me alone, I'm an adult now, and the parents were hovering. And I think I've seen a change.
Oh, totally.
And students now want their parents involved and are, unfortunately, sometimes too willing to abdicate responsibility to their parents. So, it's fine. I'll give you my email password. I'll give you my portal password, and you can check my email, and you'll let me know if there's anything important that I need to know. So it really the partnership is different. And I think we need to be careful instead of being all thrilled that, oh, good, my student is happy to let me in. That may not be the best thing.
Right. And I think there's a lot different, a big difference between being involved in coaching and supporting and doing and et cetera, and I think in some of your articles, you even talk about maybe high school is a good training ground for some of these things. Can you give some examples of what parents might do in high school so that they're a little more prepared for college?
Yeah, I think we're always happy to talk about that. But, I think it's even middle school. I don't think it's too early. Brad, I've heard you talk about in terms of financial planning, early planning and late stage planning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing is true in terms of preparing your student. There's that late stage sort of scramble to make sure your student is ready. And sometimes that happens in the car on the way to move-in day. And sometimes it's over that summer. All of a sudden this summer, we've got to make sure because you're going. But laying the groundwork in high school, laying the groundwork even beginning in middle school is going to make the path a whole lot smoother and gradual. So, yeah, there are a lot of little things. Lynn, I know you like
Sure.
that.
Oh, there's so many things. But, the general idea is letting kids make mistakes. So, for example, in high school, if your high school student relies on you to wake them up to go to school, you may want to have a conversation with them and say, when you go to college, you have to get yourself up. Why don't we do this trial where you're on your own, you're getting yourself up. And if they get up late and they are late to school, there will be a consequence, but that's how they're going to get into that rhythm of taking care of it themselves. Stuff like having students make their own doctor's appointments.
Mm-hmm.
My kids never made a doctor's appointment when they were in high school. And when they get to college, they have to call the clinic if they get sick.
Right.
Doing stuff on their own, where in high school, if they mess up, it's not too bad. It's okay. So you talk about it. But once they get into college, they have to do this stuff on their own, getting their own medications, doing their own laundry.
Right.
Thinking about food and what they eat and nutrition, because no one's going to tell them in college that they shouldn't eat ice cream 3 times a day.
Right.
Learning how to write a decent email with a greeting and an ending.
Yes.
A number of times it's sort of a standard joke among faculty that we get, the, hey, prof.
Yeah, I get that.
Email and all in text speak and all of that. So writing an email, how to talk to someone like a professor. Students are scared to come to our offices because they're not comfortable having a conversation. They would rather text us or, they think email's old-fashioned, but, send an email or text us or something. But the idea of picking up a phone and calling or coming in and having a conversation, parents can coach students. Here's what to expect and here's how to be professional. And if you have to go talk to a professor about an assignment or something, here's what you want to take with you, and here's how to ask some questions. Just those really looking at what happens all day, every day with your student, and thinking, what can I hand off to them?
Right.
And know that making mistakes is okay. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
There's this thing about failure that, there's all this hype around, we're supposed to be perfect. And that's just not human to be perfect. And everybody makes mistakes. So that's a good thing to talk about with your kids.
Right.
And the scary time to let go, when I would say you don't want this to be the first time you say, I'm going to step back and let you take charge, is the college application process.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, they need to be the driver, but they will need guidance and they will need help and all. But that's not, you can't do it for them. We can tell, message to parents, college admissions offices can tell when the parent has written the essay.
Yes.
We know that. So it's not what you want to do. You want to guide, but if that's the first time you're trying to step back, it's really, really difficult.
Right. And I see a lot of parents very in that regard. It's one of those challenges of, there's certainly a lot of students that will just excel at it and just, take charge and get it done and do really well.
Mhm.
But I have many parents that say, well, I still got to be pretty involved because, they're not going to get all 7 things on the checklist done in a timely manner. So I'm going to have to manage the checklist with them and that kind of stuff. So I think there's some sort of balance of what works for some students doesn't work for others.
Right.
And that's anybody that has multiple kids, eventually realizes that, kids
They're
are different.
so different.
And there's different rules and that type of thing.
But the choice of words matters. I'm a communication professor, and what you said is you have to manage the checklist with them, and that's very different than managing the checklist for them.
Right.
And
Absolutely. Right.
That's where
Yeah.
parents can frame it differently and think differently.
Right. And I think that should, in my opinion, my wife and I would always joke in middle school, you get that email about homework. And it's like, well, why are they sending me information about homework? I don't do homework.
Right.
It's like, you send me an email when I have to take the cell phone away. Other than that, I don't want to hear about homework. Right. I mean, that was my opinion. And I told my kids that. It's like, they might be sending me emails about stuff you're supposed to do. I delete them. I'm not going to chase you around to figure out if you've done your homework. I'm just going to take your cell phone away when it isn't done. And, that's the way I handled it.
Well, and they're learning consequences.
Right.
I can do what I want. Right. Nobody's looking over my shoulder. Dad's not checking the email. But then there will be consequences.
Right.
If it comes to that.
Exactly. And I think that's where, transitioning from, as you mentioned, the alarm clock idea and so forth, where maybe in 7th grade, you set your alarm too, just to make sure that, but in 8th grade, you just skip it and that type of thing. But
so it's all about these little steps, and the goal is that our kids grow into adults.
Yes.
I mean, that's the goal, that they are
Absolutely.
independent adults. But little tiny steps forward is the way to go, not big, huge things.
And if you've done those little tiny steps, as a parent, you have so much more confidence when you send your student off to college. So many of us are terrified when we send our student off. What are they going to do? Are they going to be able to handle themselves? Are they going to be able to do the academic work? Are they going to? And if you have some confidence that you have seen them demonstrate some of this independence, some of these life skills, then you're a little less nervous sending them off to school. Students, we talked earlier about students who struggle. And so often what we see, when students struggle, it's not the academic work. It's not that they're not able to do the work. It's life that gets in the way of them being able to function.
Right. Yeah. And I guess I see that a lot as with, again, in working with parents. And I think the other thing, again, is there's a wide swath of students out there. So the student that's going to live at home and go to the local community college because they're not ready to, go far and wide is kind of a different process than, we're flying across the country and looking at schools in 10 states. And when they're gone off to college, they're going to be 1,000 miles away, and they can call me, but there's not much I can be able to do about whatever problem they've encountered. So we got to have them a little better trained and understanding what their options are, et cetera.
But, there's a challenge, a different kind of a challenge when your student is living at home. So the student who graduates from high school and then is going to live at home, parents have a challenge of how to help that student begin to detach, begin to let go. It it's so easy to just continue the way you've been doing things. Now, instead of going off to the high school, they're going off to the community college, but we continue to function the same way. So I think parents who have students who are going to live at home really need to talk to that student about how are things going to be different. You're not a high school student anymore, you're a college student. What's going to be different about how you do your work, about what I expect you to do? Do I expect you to continue to function is part of the family? Do you still have a curfew? Do you have to report to me? Are you went in? How are you going to do your work? Are you going to stay overnight with friends on campus? There are so many other issues and challenges that parents who have students who are living at home face as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then, so I have a high school, or excuse me, I have high school kids, yet I also have a college freshman who is now home for the first summer. So that's kind of a bit of a transition now too, where, he spent the last school year with nobody telling him when he has to go eat or whatever it is. And he struggled a little bit with, dinner's at 7, be here. No, I mean, when I go to the Commons, I can go anytime between 5 and 8 and I can get dinner. And it's like, yes, but here dinner's at 7. So, or if we're not, if we're not able to get it on the table at 7, it'll be at 8, and you're just going to have to live with that. And, some of those things. But yeah, so there's a lot of great information on your website and your podcast. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's one of the challenges of, learning some of this in general is, okay, we've scratched the surface on a couple of these things. I need to dive into, again, something that caught someone's attention on this podcast. So can you tell us about your website and podcast and what's there and who it's for and what they might gain from it?
Sure. Well, let me talk about the website, and then Lynn can talk about the podcast. As I said, the website is an informational website. That's the whole purpose of it, to help parents have the information that's going to help them. We believe that information is empowering, and understanding your role, understanding how it's different. So the website has categories. One thing to do is look at the categories that are there and say, well, okay, my student is transitioning to college. I might want to start with those articles. Or my student is struggling. I want, I don't need to worry about transition right now. I just have to look at that. My student is graduating. I just found this website, and I have a student who's graduating from college. What should I be thinking about? What should I do? So if parents have a specific need, to go to those categories. Otherwise, it's really just sort of browse and see. You can do a search. I have a specific question and do that. Try to include everything from what can you do in high school to help them prepare. What should you be thinking about in that transition, that really tough summer between high school and college? And how that late stage planning, what do we do there? Now my student has gone off to college. What should I be thinking about in that first year? What might be going on? What happens in sophomore year? To just do a search on the website for sophomore and talking about sophomore slump and sophomore challenges. And so, to look at categories and browse, to look for a specific thing, and see what you need and what's going to be helpful. And then the podcast,
the podcast is available wherever, you get your podcasts, and you could also find it on our website. We put out a podcast every 2 weeks. We cover some of the similar topics. We are talking to parents about how to parent college students, but it starts earlier than college. The shifts start earlier. And in addition, we have had the honor to interview a number of writers who have put out fabulous books on the topic. So, definitely check our podcast for some of the best stuff out there, best authors out there who deal with things from, college health to finances, to emotional, mental health issues, addiction. So the interviews have been really, really fun to do. So just check us out.
All right. And again, that is at collegeparentcentral.com.
Yes.
Yep.
And the podcast is called College Parent Central
Podcast. We tried to keep it simple.
Yep. Okay. Well, I really do appreciate you guys spending the time with us, and a lot of good tips there. And again, a ton more on your website and in your podcast. So I appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks so
pleasure.
much for having us.
All right. That was a great interview. Hopefully you learned as much as I did. I appreciate Vicki and Lynn giving us all this great information. Stay tuned for Brad Recommends. I'll talk a little bit more about their website. I am recommending you go check it out, and perhaps their book as well.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
Today, I'm recommending that you check out College Parent Central. We just had an interview with the authors, and there's a lot of great information on this website. They have sections called New College Parent, When There's Trouble, Future College Parents, Resources and Help, Gift Suggestions, and there's a lot of things that you can search for, and then it's relatively well organized so you can find some of the stuff that you're interested in learning more about. They also have a ebook if you want to buy the ebook. It's 60 practical tips for using the high school years to prepare your student for college success. I think that's another great tool. I did buy it and download it, and it's about 30 pages long. It's not overwhelming, and it's nice because it has, again, the 60 tips where you can quickly go through and pick the 10 or 20 tips that are most important to you and start implementing them, and then come back 6 months or a year later and see if there's other tips that might be appropriate. Now, in the book, the information is organized by chapter as well. So chapter 1 is high school curriculum. Chapter 2, preparing emotionally. 3 is financial knowledge. 4 is managing life. 5 is looking ahead to next steps. And then 6 is 2 final questions. So each of these topics has, typically a sentence or 2 describing it, and then maybe a paragraph that gives you a little more information. So as an example, in financial knowledge, it talks about have the credit card talk and discuss realistic living expenses, understanding how a credit report works and the implications of that. So there's a lot of different, again, quick tips that many families can use as you're preparing your student to get ready for college, and all the things around life and finances and all the different categories we just mentioned. So, and a lot of this information, of course, is also in the blog and on the website in various articles as well. And When There's Trouble is, of course, an area that I haven't seen other places where it talks about things like transferring schools or taking a year off or other options when students are struggling in school or have other problems. So go ahead and check out the website. Again, it's collegeparentcentral.com. And that's all we have for you today. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.